access, especially in rural areas and in areas experiencing high unemployment rates. And to that end, I would like to share with you some of our accomplishments, and I will be brief in my comments as you have received them in a package previously, and I have additional copies if you need those here today. Our major accomplishments have been being able to introduce technology into an outdated and sometimes broken process. It's allowed us to reach out to those workers that have been waiting for hearings, to notify them shortly before their hearing dates to increase attendance at those hearings, to introduce a paperless or paper reduction project in our system, and most importantly, to hire additional judges to address the needs of our unemployed and disabled workers. With 2.2 million Californians unemployed in the state of California, it really represents 8 million unemployed because we have had 3 additional federal extensions for those that have not been able to find work, and each of those extensions requires a new application. So we certainly have experienced an increased workload in our agency this year. We will end the year having served more than 400,000 claimants in the appeal process. And with me today is my Vice Chair, George Plesha, and I'll allow him to share some of those accomplishments with you.
Thank you very much.
First of all, just do my introduction. Senators, good afternoon.
Always take direction from your board chair.
I've been taking direction from her for a long time.
And after today, we hope
I'm ever going to get loser. Senators, good afternoon. As I've met with all of you regarding this, my previous 6 years doing public service in the Assembly, and before that I worked for Senator Bill Morrow for 7 years. So I've been in public service for a long time and in state government, and just try to bring that constituent services and working through making government efficient and use my experience in that aspect. And it has been a pleasure to serve on this board for the first year so far, and we've had a challenging year, but we're working through it. And I would like to just turn it back over to the committee for any questions.
Thank you very much. I know, why don't I begin with some questions. First of all, I appreciate the fact that both of you have taken on a very difficult assignment, because this is a troubled board and troubled agency in terms of its history. You didn't cause it, but when I look at the backlog, when I look at the state of our unemployment insurance fund itself, and of course when you combine that with the state of the economy and the recession, your work is very challenging. I want to ask you specifically about the administration's furlough policy and the fact that 36 furlough days annually, you have told me, has a significant impact on your ability to deal with the backlog. Can you please both describe your view, not politically or your opinion about whether the furloughs are right or wrong, but specifically their impact on your ability to reduce the backlog and get the job done?
First of all, I'd like to address the furlough issue. The governor did put the requests in, and we aggressively sought an exemption twice to the furloughs, and were turned down. But what we were able to do is get an exemption in the fact that we went on self-directed furloughs, meaning our employees could continue to work and bank those days off, and I am thankful to our employees for continuing to work. It allowed us to...
A debt for the state, in other words.
Yes. It's banking a vacation day.
Right.
But we are thankful for them for staying on. That's allowed us to stay open 5 days a week to service the constituents, employers, and employees. It's even allowed some of our offices to stay open on Saturdays to better address those. And then, in addition, we also got an exemption on the goods and services that allowed us to go out, like in our current office facilities. We're able to get some construction done and add 27 hearing rooms to take in more cases at a time. We've also been able to contract out with other state agencies to use some of their space in disadvantaged communities where there's high unemployment to try and get these hearings going and getting more on the road. So the furlough has it's just the sheer numbers of our workload. Our employees are working extremely hard. We've been able to keep our head above water and plug along, but they have been working extremely hard. So we haven't closed down or cut back on anything.
So is what you're saying, are the furloughs is essentially not in effect at the board because the employees are working the full 5 days a week and just not getting paid for the time until sometime later?
Correct. And board members are also on the furlough and working 5 days a week and not getting paid. So they're banking those basically as vacation days. But if they do take vacation, we take those furlough days first before we take their accrued vacation time off.
Mr. Chairman, and you've asked both of us to respond. I think one of the challenges that the furlough has brought to our agency is the sheer volume of work that's coming in, because it's not just new unemployed workers, it's also the extension, which each new extension was not just automatic, it also created a new set of circumstances or criteria for those applicants. So we treat those as new claims, but it's also created some opportunities for us. We've been thinking outside of the box of how we can serve the community. And some of our offices are open on Saturdays or evenings. We've also devised strike teams of traveling judges to go out into the areas experiencing high demographics. And we've done everything possible to work within the framework of the existing policy of the executive order. We have, as Mr. Plesha said, aggressively sought exemptions from it. We were able to get a self-directed one, and we recognize that in the future that might have some significant impact on our budget, might have significant impact on the number of employees that will retire with that accrued time, but our focus has been today, making sure that we don't allow a claimant to wait one more day than necessary to receive benefits.
Let me be, if I may, a little more concrete. The legislative analyst reported in June that the board had a backlog of 96,900 pending appeals. What is that backlog today, and what specifically are you doing as the board chair, and Mr. Plesha, you as a board member, to reduce that backlog? And I know this is a run-on question here. What are your benchmarks in terms of that 96,000 number as time progresses?
Well, I'm pleased to report that our numbers are no longer at the 96,000 mark. We are closer to the 70,000 mark, and that has been because we've aggressively sought new ways to conduct our hearings. Legislation passed this year that allowed us to conduct phone hearings at the request of the claimant. If they were experiencing child care or transportation barriers, they could request having a hearing conducted over the phone if both parties were in agreement. We also were able to handle some cases administratively. We are conducting what's called mass calendars, where if these are cases that can be resolved in less than 30 minutes, we are scheduling multiple cases within an hour's time frame with a revolving set of judges so that we are able to quickly expedite those cases. Some cases can be resolved administratively where no hearing is needed at all. A judge can review the evidence or ask the claimant to come into the office and review the evidence. It may be a case where a mistaken Social Security number or identity, and those are resolved rather quickly. The other impact that had nothing to do with the number of judges conducting hearings had to do with actually processing the outcome of that hearing. And we had a backlog of over 4,500 cases that needed typing. We created a typing pool. We got typists from across the state, other state agencies working on overtime, and we drove down the 4,500 cases to 400 in a 4-week period.
Hopefully not using typewriters.
No, thank God for technology and spell check. That allowed us to do what would normally take 5 to 15 days to come out of a steno pool. We were able to reduce down to a 1 or 2 day period. In addition to that, we've also introduced new software, DragonSpeak, which allows the judges another option. It allows them to use voice-to-text software to self-dictate their reports, and they get instantaneous results, again, bypassing the typing pool. So it has created some challenges, no doubt, and we will certainly have consequences for them in the future. But today, we are doing everything we can to drive down the numbers quickly.
Last question, then I'll turn it over to other members of the committee. As you seek to reduce this backlog, and you've cited a couple of strategies to do so, including scheduling many cases within a short period of time, how are you assuring and evaluating as time goes by that efficiency and reducing the backlog does not reduce or eliminate the actual quality of the appeal that an individual or an employer is entitled to?
Actually, we just got back a report, and we are evaluated quarterly, and I believe the last 13 or 14 quarters in a row, we've received the highest marks in efficiency. In addition to that, we've also hired a new administrative law judge to help us in the appellate division, because we've also added on 90 new judges this year, and we want to ensure that through their training programs that there is someone helping them, monitoring them, nurturing them. We've also created a mini academy, and currently both the board and the judges are going through additional training so that with the new changes in the extensions, we're not missing opportunities or getting whacked by the Department of Labor because of problems.
You use the word efficiency, but
It's quality.
I want to focus in on the quality issue.
The quality control.
Are you looking at, on top of whether or not in the drive to reduce the backlog, which is a legitimate and an important thing to do, that fairness, if you will, let's use that instead of the word quality, is not being compromised as a result of trying to move faster?
Yes, as the chair mentioned, and she misspoke on efficiency, Department of Labor does look at us quarterly, and our quality standards are extremely high. So we're very proud of that. So they're going to be keeping a look at that quarterly also. And we're just not sort of jamming new technology or being a heavy-handed board. We're working with our staff to make sure everything works, and there is that quality standard up to a level that we expect.
Let me just conclude by saying due process is extremely important to us. And California is one of 43 states that has a second level of appeal. This board, on average, reviews about 30 cases a day. So we not only look at what the first level of appeal has done and the second level of appeal, the appellate judge is looking at, but we also require 2 board members to sign off on a decision. Due process will never be diminished in pursuit of having a fast-track system. That will never be diluted.
Thank you. Senators, questions?
Anderson wants to know. I just wanted to say that I have been reminded very strenuously by former Senator Liz Figueroa, who has advocated on the behalf of both of you about the condition, to remember the condition of the agency before you got there and how it is today. And she gives you the highest recommendations, and having been her vice chair for many years on a committee here in the Senate, those don't come lightly. And so I just want to congratulate you on the job that you've done, and hope it continues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How many attorneys did you have? How many ALJs? You said you hired 90.
We've actually hired them through 2 different phases. In phase 1, we hired 21 new ALJs and promoted 10 to ALJ2s. In hiring phase 2, we hired 40 ALJ1s and 10 ALJ2s, so that brings our total to 91. I believe we've also added, we have a new class also coming through now, but we've also added 2 permanent positions, our Chief Administrative Law Judge for field operations and for appellate operations, and also an assistant to handle the administrative or management, so that would bring us to 94.
Were these additional hires? Were you filling vacancies? Were these
Additional hires, and that also does not include any retired annuitants that we were hiring from other agencies as they went into retirement. And we are aggressively pursuing the recruitment because we know, so many judges from other agencies would fit very well with the work that we're doing at our agency.
So what's the percent increase? How many ALJs did you have before you hired the 90?
I believe we were at about 145 or 146, something like that.
So it's a 40% increase. So that has that enhanced the ability of the judges to spend more time, to reduce their backlog, to have to pay more attention to the cases, to spread them out over the other additional 90 judges?
It's allowed us to do several things. The first was to go out into the rural communities where people were having a challenge coming into an urban field office. We have 12 fixed locations across the state. We were able to open satellite offices in areas where, we really needed to meet the unemployed's needs. The Central Valley, up in the valley in Los Angeles County. I'm sorry?
Also the IE?
IE. In areas like San Diego County, Sacramento, and the Inland Empire, we had the highest unemployment in the state, and it allowed us to create strike teams, traveling judges, to go into those regions. Those 3 regions had a backlog of more than 10,000 cases, which resulted in a waiting period of about 3 months. We recognize that at the other end of that wait is someone facing homelessness, losing their car, their house. So we did everything possible to have the senior judges working on cases that required more complex issues to be resolved or translation issues, and then the new judges to handle those that can be easily resolved.
Okay.
I also want to make sure it's clear. It takes about 6 months for these judges to really get up to speed to handle all the different cases and aspects of the law. So some of the first hires are there right now, but we still have some of the second hiring rounds are really getting a little bit more training. They handle the easier cases, but it's still freed up a lot of time for our more senior judges to handle the difficult cases, and they've been able to go to the other offices and help out with the simpler.
You had mentioned some hybrid scenarios that you are able, because of their nature, able to address more appropriately and more efficiently. You want to tell us about that?
We have cases, for example, where the Social Security numbers are off, or the person does not have the proper identity documents for EDD to process a claim. We're able to handle these administratively, where the claimant can walk into the office, present his documents, thereby bypassing the wait for a hearing. We also have cases where the hearings will be less than 30 minutes. There's an issue where perhaps they didn't appear at their last hearing. They had a problem with babysitting or a job, and they are asking for reopening. Those cases would take less than 30 minutes to resolve. We are able to put those on a mass calendar. 3 judges work together on a team, and we schedule 2 or 3 cases within the hour. The other issues that we were able to address was appearance. About 30% of our claimants did not show up for their hearings. And as a result, they would request reopening. So when you look at a backlog, that backlog represents not only new cases, but people requesting reopenings. 3 out of 10 cases were related to reopenings. Handling them quickly helped us reduce that backlog.
Tell me about your outreach to those communities. I'm pleased to hear your outreach to Chala, Imperial, IE, Central Valley. What were the methods or mechanisms for your outreach, particularly on these cases of the notice?
In terms of notice to the
Notice to applicants, both the pro tem and I'm sure all of us are concerned about the quality, so that the efficiency is also commensurate with the quality that's needed. Part of this is people getting notice, making sure they know they have a hearing coming up, making sure there's a date they're being communicated to in both language and means, which is typical of how they're communicated to. So we had talked about some methods that you were employing.
There were several different methods that we looked at. The first was making sure that people could come to their hearing and that they were prepared when they came to those hearings. We created a video that is now on our website that walks people through how to prepare for the hearing. Second thing we did is the appeal, when it's filed, is filed with EDD. We reevaluated the form that they were currently using, and we recognized that EDD, because of their outdated, antiquated computer system, could not accommodate additional information. We redesigned the form to collect the email address and a second phone number. The current form only allowed for 1 phone number, and that will allow us to email and also to text message. If there's a phone cell phone number information bypassing the cost to the state for a phone call. And we created in-house voice texting system that will alert people 2 days before their hearing. We are now in the process with a $1.2 million grant that we recently got to creating a VoIP system where we will call them through the internet, and we'll call them as soon as their hearing is scheduled. So they will have 4 or 5 opportunities in order to get accommodated. In addition to that, they are given information in that phone call that if they have some challenges, how they should reach us, so that, and by the way, the calls are now made in Spanish and in English, so that they can talk to a live person about accommodating a phone hearing or a change of location or a change of address. So we are doing 5 or 6 different things. In addition to that, we are working with EDD through their outreach efforts to make sure that as they're going out, we don't have, mobile units or anything like that. As they're going out, that we're integrated into their process so we can deliver the same type of system.
Thank you, Senator Cedillo. Senators Dutton or Oropeza?
No, sir. I've met with them privately, and also many of the questions have been raised
Okay.
by my colleagues.
Very, very, very good. All right, thank you. Let us now hear from witnesses in support first and then in opposition of the nominees to come forward. And I think we can, sergeants, if we might use that microphone over there.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I'm Malachi Sekou Amen with the California State NAACP. And I have to say that there are not very many folks, public servants, that is in particular, that you'd come off of vacation to deliver support for. But the NAACP is very proud to support Bonnie Garcia for the Unemployment Appeals Board. And we're doing that because we understand that she has a great history. Also, I personally understand she has a great history working on behalf of communities to make sure that their social and economic needs are well cared for, that people have an opportunity to participate in this economy and to get back on their feet. And for those reasons, we're very strong supporters of Bonnie Garcia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Min. Very good. Again, public is always welcome to say whatever you choose. If you could make your support or opposition relatively succinct, that would be great.
Chair Steinberg, members of the committee, my name is Mary Galvan Rosas. I'm here as a board member of HOPE, Hispanas Organized for Political Equality, with my board chair, Elmi Bermejo. As a former board member of the Board of Optometry, and in 2008 I served as Deputy Director for the Consumer Affairs Department, I'm here to speak on behalf of Chairwoman Bonnie Garcia and her confirmation. Today you have the opportunity to bring forth a leader, not just in the community, but also in government. I have witnessed Bonnie take on challenges that are pretty much status quo and look at things in an innovative way, in a way to make services and resources that government wants to provide to Californians. And she's able to make sure that, A, she can assess what communities have the most need, how does government look at how they're delivering those services and making them more accessible and efficient. There's nothing worse than watching a family go through this. So I'm here to respectfully ask for your confirmation.
Thank you very much. Next.
Good morning, Chairman Steinberg, members of the committee. My name is Elmi Bermejo, and I'm the board chair of HOPE, Hispanas Organized for Political Equality. And just briefly in support of Bonnie's confirmation, we at HOPE train over 5,000 Latinas throughout the state. One of those key conferences is here in Sacramento. And when Bonnie first came to the assembly, we met with her, and she opened her doors and has been from that day on, very, very helpful to the women who participate in our programs, who saw her as a role model, and she was always there willing and able to answer questions, and sometimes always giving not only good advice, but sometimes tough advice that we all need to listen to. So I will urge you for your I vote for Bonnie Garcia. Thank you for this time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bermejo. Appreciate it. Next, any other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition to either or both? 4. We're still on 4. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, my name is Adrian Perez. I'm publisher of the Latino Journal, the largest online publication focused on public policy and government. We've been around for over 13 years. We have followed many careers. Ms. Garcia's career we have definitely followed. We've seen what she's done, not only for her constituency, but for communities throughout the state, not only the Latino community, but the African American community and the Asian community. We strongly support and urge your confirmation vote.
Thank you very much, Mr. Perez. Witnesses in opposition. Anybody on the fence? This is the Capitol, you know. So let me make some brief comments. I support both of your nominations, intend to support your confirmations. And we've talked a lot about the issue of administration of the board, but there's something we haven't raised, and that is the fact that you are essentially judges, appellate judges, in many respects. And I just want to say for the record, had the opportunity to look at your records over your first year in terms of deciding cases, because one of the things you always want to look for is bias, and whether, you know, it's these battles are fought out before the United States Senate oftentimes when it comes to judicial confirmation, the difference between political views, and we all know you come from different political parties and different point of views, and you have public voting records on issues relating to labor and employment. But there's a difference between the role of a legislator and the role of a judge. And I'm comfortable and confident that you take these cases right down the middle, and your record reflects that. And for that reason, in addition to the fact that I think you, Ms. Garcia especially, have taken an appropriate and very aggressive role in trying to deal with this backlog fairly, and that you're shaking it up administration-wise, I'm pleased to support both your nominations. So if there's a motion by Senator Onnested, other comments? If not, please call the roll.
Senator Cedillo.
Did you, Senator Cedillo, did you have a comment?
Senator Cedillo concurs with the pro tem, thinks that, you know, I'm not a fan of term limits. But I think something interesting is happening is that leaders are given an opportunity these days, like yourselves, to serve in the legislature, in a policy body, and then able to take those experiences, that leadership, into a more administrative, quasi-judicial entity with some understanding of how agencies work and how the economy is having its impact on the people of California. And I think it enriches the delivery of those services from the state to have both of you as leaders, both from the legislature and today as leaders working for the state. And so I applaud your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very good. Please call the roll.
Senator Cedillo. Cedillo, aye. Dutton. Oropeza. Oropeza, aye. Onnested. Onnested, aye. Steinberg?
Aye.
Steinberg, aye.
We'll leave the record open for Senator Dutton, but your nominations will now move to the Senate floor, where we intend to take up the nominations tomorrow.
Thank you.
So thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
And keep working hard. All
We
right?
intend to.
Thank you. And just because the confirmation process is almost over, please keep the line of communication open with the legislative branch of government, because you need to tell us how we can make your jobs better and easier and how we can better serve the people. All right?
We promise. Thank you.
All right. We now move to Michael R. Peavy, who is up for confirmation as a member and chair of the Public Utilities Commission. Mr. Peavy, welcome. To you. Senator Wright, were you here to make an introduction? Okay. Very good. Let's hear your finest oratory, please.
Okay. Let me practice that.
Short.
Yeah. What I won't bother to do is go over his bio and background because you already have that. So I think here, Mr. Chair and members, I can cut to the chase. Probably more so than any branch of government that you have in California, the Public Utilities Commission really depends on stability. You're dealing in financial markets. You're dealing with people who make long-term investments. And one of the things that you really don't want to have is the appearance that you have a Public Utilities Commission that changes with the whim and caprice and presents a sense of instability. When I chaired the Assembly Committee on Utilities and Commerce, one of the things that occurred was that we had a significant breakdown at the PUC. It is typically a body that's not thought of very much, and people kind of put it on the back burner. But the failure of the Public Utilities Commission in 1999 through 2001 probably ended up costing the state of California somewhere north of $50 billion just because of an inept commission. I saw a private businessman, Mr. Peavy, go into then advised Governor Davis, who was like a deer in headlights, because he didn't appreciate the magnitude of what was beginning to unfold in an energy crisis. And then I saw him go to a Public Utilities Commission that had been at war with the legislature at the time. He resolved those issues with just straight leadership and straight talk. I don't think anyone would say that Mr. Peavy does not have the ability to tell you what he thinks. But I think that you'll know that you got a fair hearing with Mr. Peavy, and I think that that's important. His leadership at the commission, the restoration of confidence has restored investment in California. I think that as I look at both the natural gas, the telephone, the wireless, and the energy business in California since his leadership, it's been impeccable. I can probably say at the risk of hyperbole that if Mr. Peavy had not appeared on that commission at the time that he did, the state of California would probably be insolvent right now because you did not have leadership prepared to do that. I would urge his confirmation. I would love to stand up and say that we should appoint him or reappoint him quickly, because this is not the time, Mr. Chair and members, that you want to instill any sense of instability in an agency like the Public Utilities Commission in California.
Thank you very much, Senator Wright, our colleague, for coming forward and introducing Mr. Peavy. We appreciate it. Mr. Peavy, welcome. Again, we want to accord you the opportunity to introduce any special guest in the audience and
Well, we have Senator Liu. We have a relationship for some time.
Yes, we know, and she's a wonderful and valued colleague, and we welcome Senator Liu here today. Thank you.
There's several other people that are here. The former Senator Escudia.
Wonderful.
Former Business and Transportation Secretary Sonny McPeak.
Welcome, Madam Secretary.
Professor of Politics and Related Topics at Sac State, Barbara O'Connor.
Welcome, Professor.
A man from my past who's sitting up close here, former Senator Joe Montoya.
Welcome, welcome, sir.
Any of you remember Joe? And there's several others, including my recent new concerned colleague, Mark Toney.
A good way to start the discussion here. Here we go. Mr. Peavy, go right ahead. Brief opening statement about, I'd be interested in hearing your not only vision for the future, but as you sort of assess all of the support you have, and you made a light reference to Mr. Toney and some of the critiques you have heard about, not just yourself, but the PUC over time. how you take that all in and how you would intend to move forward with the second term.
Well, let me start with a little preface. As Senator Wright made reference, I was drafted by then Governor Davis to go on the Public Utilities Commission to fill out the unexpired term of another member, then reappointed by him. He asked me to go onto the Public Utilities Commission because he was gravely concerned about all the things that were going on at the time. Those of you who were in the legislature in 2000, I mean, it was a shocking time. Frankly, I remember meeting you at the time, Senator, at the height of the energy crisis, 2000, 2001. Believe it or not, it's indelible in my mind that at the beginning of 2001, the general fund had a surplus of $8 billion. $8 billion. And in the space of 6 months, it was all gone. It was all gone buying electricity because the one utility was bankrupt and the others had no credit. They couldn't buy anything, so the State Department of Water Resources had to step in and do the purchases. And they're still in the business of doing purchases today, not something anybody sought, including themselves. I think in the period of time between 2002 and 2005, we righted the ship at the Public Utilities Commission and put it on a course where instead of being front page news almost daily in the press, it got pushed to the back pages of the press and often just to the business page. I have spent the last few years trying to ensure for all the participants, and we have a multifold constituents at the Public Utilities Commission. So we have consumer groups, we have the utilities, we have the environmental community, we have organized labor, we have many, many others, the minority community, that everybody is given a fair shake and a fair treatment. And we listen to them all, at least I try to, and try to call it as I see it in terms of decision making. I think that we've done a reasonable job, and I think, Senator, that the fact that there is support for me from all walks of life, all those groups I mentioned and many others, is probably testament to the fact that the Commission has been on a steady course. As we go ahead to the next several years, the biggest challenges, frankly, to me, are to some degree being played out 7,000 miles from here today in Copenhagen. The question of what we're going to do, how we're going to implement AB 32 in the next few years in this state and in this nation, how we're going to deal with renewable energy, how we're going to get to the goals that we've set for ourselves administratively, and the legislature's articulated itself, 33% and all, are tremendous challenges, and it's an area it's the energy area where I have some expertise. Doing those things is going to require an awful lot of work, hard work, and sacrifice by a lot of people. I'm an optimist. I think this state can meet its environmental goals and its energy goals through energy efficiency, through renewables, through additional transmission, through a whole host of other things. But we also have to deal with other big issues like water and the reduction in the use of water on a per capita basis in the state, and the nexus between water and energy. Close to 20% of electricity that we use today is used for water. Pumping water, circulating water, and sewers, and so forth. So we have the challenges are immense at a time of change. That is significant nationally and internationally, as well as right here in this state. The state is a leader in many of the environmental causes here, but the legislature enacts, and then we have to implement. And that is oftentimes more challenging even than enactment. And they're both difficult, let's face it, as we talk about looking ahead on water and some of these other issues. So I'll stop there. I mean, I look upon it as a significant challenge to do some of the things that I want to see done. I hope my colleagues all share in a joint vision of a more sustainable environment, a more sustainable economy, and a more sustainable future.
Thank you. I know I have a series of questions, but why don't I? Well, you want me to go first again? Well, I mean, I may. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Let me begin by asking you about a hot topic here, and that is renewable energy and renewable energy development. As you know, in 2002, the state enacted into law a 20% renewable energy standard, and the law was updated in 2006. And yet in the IOU territories, we're not yet at 20%, we're at 13%. Why do you believe we haven't yet met that 20%
Well,
target?
the goal was 20% by the end of 2010. So the overall average is 13%. It differs by IOU service territory. Edison is at 16-point-something%, PG&E about 13%, and 12 to 13% in San Diego in the single digits. We're not going to make 20% by the end of next year. We will make it, in fact, probably in 2013. We'll probably have contracts signed up, but not actual electrons delivered by the end of next year. The biggest single constraint on this, in addition to the incredible challenges of financing projects in today's environment, if you think a homeowner has a tough time financing a house or a remortgage, many of these projects are very, very difficult to finance. Banks are very difficult in terms of lending money and all. Besides that, though, some of the other constraints have been inadequate transmission. We have to build new transmission. Every time a transmission project is proposed, everybody that anywhere near the transmission line dislikes it. It's extremely contentious issues and that are litigated. So the state has really built one major transmission line in the last several years. We're going to have to build several more in the next 10 years to get to 20%, but even more importantly, to get to 33% renewables. So I would say financing in the short term, transmission is a more fundamental problem that is lasting, and honestly, many of some of our state requirements go to extreme, perhaps. And I'll give you an example. I mean, I'm not talking about changing CEQA or anything, but a company named BrightSource, which is largely an Israeli company, but it's headquartered in Oakland, California, would like to build the Ivanpah project. The what? It's called Ivanpah. It's a 400-megawatt solar project on the California-Oregon border, California-Nevada border, in the California side of the border. There are desert tortoises there. Maybe Senator Dutton would have some knowledge of some of these things. They're having to buy thousands of acres of additional land to move these tortoises. Now, they say, you know, if we go to Nevada, we don't have any of those concerns. We don't have any of those constraints. We don't have any of those limitations. We could just go there. We want to see these projects in California. But the challenge is you can't build them in California with the speed you could build them in another state. And that's one of the complications that was, attendant to the debate last year on RPS. How much to be built in California? How do you give California priority and so on? So we get a combination of things that have slowed down getting to 20%.
Do you believe that the Air Resources Board should have the primary authority over the implementation of the governor's executive order?
No.
I knew I'd get an honest answer. Good.
Well, I mean, the legislation that was sponsored by Senator Samiti and by Assemblyman Krikorian and others gave responsibility to the ARB in some extent, because they have AB 32, gave it to the Public Utilities Commission, gave it to the Energy Commission. I mean, I'm the president of the Public Utilities Commission. I would like to continue to have some of the authority that we would have had under the statute, or we have now, and not have it all go to the ARB. On the other hand, I do recognize that there has to be some mechanism to move on these things and have to move on it fast, and the executive order is consistent with that notion. I'm hopeful that this will be worked out very soon in the new session of the legislature.
And we intend to look. Two more questions on this subject. As you look at the alphabet soup of energy-related agencies, whether it's the PUC, ARB, the Energy Commission, the Department of Fish and Game. As we look at our energy future, while you want to retain, as you just said, some part of the energy portfolio, what is your recommendation as to how we as policymakers build a more coherent energy governance structure in this state so that we don't have 4 or more agencies with overlapping responsibilities?
Well, actually, there's many more agencies than even you enumerated. Your state water resources, got oil and gas, and state lands, and many, many others that all have peripheral pieces. But let me say this. I mean, I have, over the years, I've had varying jobs. I have urged in the past the creation of a Secretary of Energy, and I've urged all the facilitating these agencies into a cleaner line. Responsibilities in some cases. But I have to say in all candor that the Energy Commission, the Public Utilities Commission, the Cal ISO, the Independent System Operator, and the ARB have managed to work together in a manner that, in my previous experience before I ever went on the Public Utilities Commission, didn't exist. I'm not saying it's due to me. I'm just saying it's a combination of things. Yesterday in San Francisco, we had an all-afternoon meeting on what we call the Energy Action Plan, which we adopted in 2003. All the agencies, including at that time the agency called the Power Authority, and the California Power Authority, and the articulation there of policies, energy efficiency first, renewables, and so forth, has been state policy for 6 years now at the executive branch of government, and we have shown the ability for these agencies to work very cooperatively together in a way that certainly diminishes my enthusiasm for just moving the deck chairs around. The deck chairs around.
But maybe we don't need as many.
I'm sorry.
Maybe we don't need as many deck chairs.
That's right.
Maybe
well,
one
not.
Big lounge.
I mean, honestly, I would be happy to join in any kind of careful examination of how these things could be altered. But it's working now. I think the energy policy in the state, by and large, is working now. There are frustrations with some of the siting that's going on. You alluded earlier to it in asking the previous occupants of these chairs about furloughs and all that. Obviously, that has impacts in other agencies. We chose not to do that at the Public Utilities Commission.
Last question on this topic. The debate over the Semidian-Krikorian legislation, SB 14, last year, I'm oversimplifying it, but centered in part on how much renewable energy, how much of the renewable energy portfolio are we going to insist be California generated? And that's obviously, we would all agree, is a great goal, because we are also trying to build an economy here, a high-wage economy in California. Give us 1 or 2 of your lead public policy suggestions that we could translate into law this next year that would enable that debate to end in a way that leans towards more production in California as opposed to a 33% standard that's based significantly on out-of-state production.
Well, let me say at the start that if you do nothing, if we just do nothing and just had state policy to go to 33%, the movement will be in that direction, and most facilities will be built in this state regardless. And they'll be built in this state for a lot of several reasons. One of them is just physical location. For example, solar power, Mojave and Owens Valley have some of the best what's called insulation in the United States. So there's a logic to building it here, as well as immediately next to here in Arizona and in Nevada. That's number one. Number two, you want to build facilities like distributed generation where the people are. So the photovoltaic program that we've adopted for the Edison Company, 500 megawatts, is all built, going to be built right in California. PG&E will be saying all built right in California. We have this very contentious issue at the moment. It's up before the Commission tomorrow in the Tehachapi transmission line. That will bring 4,500 megawatts ultimately of power from wind from the Tehachapi region into Southern California. That's all California. So I'm not convinced that you have to make explicit the build this much here versus build that much there. What I am convinced is that you can develop criteria that will be, you want to do it at least cost as much as possible, and you could develop, and locationally you want it as much close to the load centers as possible, and you could develop criteria that will enhance that, and that will enhance California's position too. And we had a conference just last week that went on days with IBEW, with TURN, with all these groups, and we all agreed that we want to work together to try to come to a solution on this problem very early in the new year, so this thing doesn't drag on all year. I'm cautiously optimistic that can happen.
China, do you need a short? Well, I think our court reporter may need a short break here. Okay.
Do I talk to?
So what? No, it's okay. Why don't we take 10 minutes here?
It's probably me more than her, right?
No. It's just we've been going since 1:30, and I want to make sure that we take care of our court reporter here. So we'll take a short break. 10 minutes. Thank you.